People hate Adobe now. Adobe is like it's like on the Unity level, right? Where like everybody just hates it, but there's no real alternative for a lot of Adobe software that's like really been developed for a long period of time. So people are kind of stuck with Adobe.
Adobe is the world's leader in creative software. Their software powers everything from Hollywood blockbusters to your favorite YouTube videos. But beneath the surface, there's a darker story. The company's practices are so controversial that even the US government has sued Adobe. This is why Adobe is one of the most evil companies on the planet. This video is brought to you by my startup, Silo's 7.39% yielding bond accounts.
Adobe's subscription
First,
hell.
what does Adobe do? In short, Adobe makes creative software. Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and about a dozen more iconic staple programs all come from Adobe. Despite their current drama, things used to be very different. Many years back, you could actually buy Photoshop along with all of their other products.
This is a really good example of what I was talking about how I don't think this should be a... When you buy something, I think that you're entitled to certain rights for what you are purchasing that transcend terms of service. And I don't like how a lot of programs and products have been transitioned into becoming licenses and services rather than products. And I think that if you're selling something, the person needs to actually get something out of that. You can't just take it away from them at some arbitrary period of time because you've decided this is a rule. Because at the end of the day, the reason why the company does this is because the government lets them do that. Like, somebody could just steal all the stuff from Adobe and give it out for free if there were no rules, right? So there are rules to protect companies like this. But where are the rules to protect people from companies that take advantage of the rules? And I think that we've gone so far in the direction of these subscriptions being predatory and just completely all-encompassing that I really think that we need some consumer protections for this. And I think it's been the case for probably, I mean, this should have happened 15 years ago. But, you know, obviously, like a lot of the government's not really as tech-savvy, so they don't understand it. I think that if you buy Photoshop, you should be able to use Photoshop for whatever you want to. The idea that you need a professional license is outrageous unless you're getting extra tools. And the idea that they can take it away from you or make it stop functioning after a period of time is insane. You gave them the money. And I understand that there's the terms of service, but who's to say that that's acceptable or ethical or fair to the consumer?
Pick up a physical disc in store, install it, and you're good to go. They were expensive at around $700, but once you bought it, you owned that copy of Photoshop. Also, you could upgrade to the newest version for only $200. People loved Adobe's products. They were the best. The company had an amazing reputation, but all of this was about to change. At some point, Adobe's executives realized something. They could make much more money if they overhauled their business model. Have you noticed how almost every digital product or service is now a subscription? This is called software as a service.
This is so fucking annoying. Like, it really is. And the thing about it that's so frustrating to me is that a lot of the software as service doesn't have to be like that. Like, there's no reason. How many of you guys have used cracked versions of Adobe Photoshop? I have. Works just fucking fine.
You pay regularly to use the software instead of buying it outright, and Adobe was one of the first to adopt it. Someone might spend more at once on buying their Creative Suite for $2,000.
That's insane.
But this method has a massive downside. Getting a customer to make such a massive purchase is extremely difficult.
100%.
But a subscription for the same product at a fraction of that price is much easier to digest.
Sure.
People rarely factor in the distant future and end up paying more than they would have if they just bought the expensive package to start with.
Well, we saw this with the Chase Bank glitch, right? I mean, this is the same exact thing. Is that people can't so it's like it's $70 a month, and is that better than $500? Well, it's only $70 a month. So, yeah, and you get it for a whole year. So it's like, wait a minute. And then you get people to spend $700 instead of $500. No, I'm telling you guys, people's math abilities, however bad you think they are, they're worse. And they are getting worse every single day.
Adobe soon completely stopped selling products that you could own. You could no longer buy Photoshop. Instead, they began licensing products you could lease. Their revenue began to soar as they added hundreds of millions every quarter.
Wow.
But they also gained something else. With a subscription, you're paying Adobe to use their software. They own the license, which means they have all the power.
That's
they
right.
They can change anything they want whenever they feel like it. And
this is the problem, and this is why you need consumer protection laws. I'm so glad this guy's making this video. And I'm so glad that this is finally going to get addressed because it is so long overdue. And I think this issue is something that is overreaching for like tons of services. They can revoke it for any reason. Exactly. Yeah, it's outrageous.
This is where all the problems started. Adobe soon began sending strange letters to customers using previous versions of their software stating, "We have recently discontinued certain older versions of Creative Cloud applications, and as a result, under the terms of our agreement, you are no longer licensed to use them. Please."
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't think this should be legal. I don't think it should be legal. That's it, right? And like, I'm not like mad at Adobe, the same as like I'm not mad at like a raccoon for breaking into like my attic, because it's like, well, that's just what raccoons do. I mean, they're animals. This is what they do. Like, this is a company, it's designed to make money. I'm not mad at Adobe. I'm mad at the government for letting this happen, to be honest with you. This is incredible that this has been allowed.
Please be aware that should you continue to use the discontinued versions, you may be at risk of potential claims of infringement by third parties. These were Creative Cloud subscribers who hadn't updated their software in a while. Adobe never explained the full reasoning behind these threats, but naturally, this upset a lot of people. Yet, this isn't why Adobe is being sued by the US government.
Thank fucking God. Finally.
The reason behind that is much worse. Adobe offers Creative Cloud through an annual or monthly subscription, and they even offer a 7-day trial. But things aren't as they seem. If you sign up for this trial, it says paid monthly, except it's not a monthly subscription. It's a yearly subscription that's billed monthly. Adobe does offer a monthly subscription at $90 a month, subtly encouraging users to take the cheaper monthly option, but this is a trap. If you sign up and continue past 14 days, you're locked in, and Adobe will do everything in their power to keep you there. How? With their dreaded cancellation fee. Hidden in their fine print, if you want to cancel your subscription, you will need to pay 50% of your remaining subscription upfront, which is oftentimes hundreds of dollars. And
it's crazy how people let this happen. Adobe learned their ABCs. They did. It's just a scam, right? That's it. It's just a scam. Why the heck is this allowed? Because the government makes it possible. Like, Adobe can't steal the money out of your bank account. If you owe this money to Adobe, the government can make you give Adobe the money. That's the problem. It's not like Adobe is going to send people to your house. It's the government that's going to do it for them. Why is there no competitor? It doesn't matter whether there's a competitor or not. An unethical business practice shouldn't exist regardless of whether they exist inside of a monopoly or not, because it's something that's bad for consumers and it hurts them. So, like, yeah, no, you're right that there should be more competitors, and there are things like GIMP and things like that. But in a general sense, no, I don't think that definitely, it doesn't just, like, the idea that the free market solves all problems is not really true, because all free markets are immediately controlled and made not free.
Adobe isn't very transparent about this. Users who unsubscribe are surprised to see Adobe charge them hundreds of dollars, seemingly out of nowhere. People have been experiencing Adobe's greed for years. Adobe ripped me off for $60 after I signed up for a free trial, proceeded to cancel the trial, and then got charged for the product anyway. Adobe tried to charge me $162 to cancel my Creative Cloud subscription. One user was charged over $300 to cancel their plan,
Yep.
and another even had Adobe attempt to bill them after they paid the cancellation fee. But it gets even worse. Many subscriptions allow you to turn off auto-renew, so your plan will automatically cancel at
No.
the end. Adobe doesn't. You can't.
You can check in anytime, but you can never leave. Currently, you cannot stop your plan from renewing automatically. Oh my fucking god. This is amazing. They went all in. This is... What?
Can't just disable auto-renewing.
This is
The only way to
insane.
cancel is to cancel the entire plan, which causes the massive cancellation fee. And none of this is new either. Adobe has been doing this for many years, except now it's finally catching up with them.
Yeah, thank
The US
God.
Federal Trade Commission has taken action against the
So it's been happening since 2005, and finally the FTC is like, hey, did you hear about this thing with a Photoshop?
Adobe, but this isn't just any lawsuit.
Oh,
Usually,
God.
a limited liability company protects the individuals. But
Yeah.
the US government is bypassing that, given that this is a special case of greed and malice.
Absolutely
They
is.
are deliberately going after individual executives, two
Yes.
in particular. The president
That is... Thank fucking God. That's awesome. Fuck yes. Yeah. Like, and this is what... Remember what I said before? Is that, you know, if you want bad practices to stop, you hold people directly accountable who are doing them. You don't hold the company accountable. You look at names and faces and you punish those individual people and you put them up in front of everybody else and you say, if you fuck around, you're going to find out just like he did. That's what it is.
and vice president of Adobe's digital media business.
Oh.
They argued that Adobe fails to adequately disclose to consumers that by signing up for the annual paid monthly subscription plan, they're agreeing to a year-long commitment and a hefty early termination fee that can amount to hundreds of dollars. Adobe clearly discloses the termination fee only when subscribers attempt to cancel, turning the termination fee into a powerful retention tool that generates significant revenues by trapping consumers into subscriptions they no longer want.
Man, that's just about it, isn't it? I gotta say, fuck Adobe. Yeah, it's unbelievable that this is even happening. Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, that's almost indefensible on their side, the way they do it intentionally, since they know how it works. Of course they do. Well, it's done maliciously with an intention to take advantage of the person. It's an unfair business practice. Well, it's bad for consumers. And I think that if you have something like this that's basically a scam, like effectively, this is the way that I look at the government, is the government should be there to make things fair and to keep people from, you know, exploiting each other, basically, right? That's one of the things the government is there for. So if you have a situation where a company is using a tool that's made by the government to exploit people, this is an abuse of game mechanics. You should not have this happen. Like, it's not good for anybody. Not to collect taxes. No, yeah, but what do you do with the tax money, right? This happened to me too, and I'm outside the U.S. Well, like, because here's the thing, right, is if you didn't have the government, if there was no government, you know what would happen? People would go to the Adobe headquarters and burn the building down. That's what would happen. So the reason why that doesn't happen is because of the government. So the only reason why the company can exist is because they are being protected and they are allowed to exist. That's it. Anarchy, lynch mobs. That's right. And any place that has no laws and no government to protect this stuff, that's exactly what happens.
Adobe naturally disagrees with the decision. They stated that cancellation fees make up less than 1% of their revenue, though that raises even more questions. Namely, why are they so insistent on using something which has given them so much backlash, which amounts to less than 1% of their revenue? If it's truly less than 1% and it's given them so many issues, why not just remove it? Simple. The process to unsubscribe is horrible. With all kinds of obstacles and the massive cancellation fee, people often stay subscribed even if they don't want to. Long term, this gives Adobe more money and allows them to boast about their low cancellation rates to shareholders. That's why.
Yeah, so, okay, I really like this argument that he's using. So he's saying basically that the reason why it only accounts for 1% is because it's obstructive in a way that makes people not do it. So the actual amount of people that are taken advantage of is higher because of the nature of the way that it's obstructive. That's a very good point.
The FTC is suing Adobe.
Yeah.
Customers couldn't be happier, as it seems like justice is finally being served.
Yeah, I think this is a problem in general. It's not something that's an issue with like Photoshop specifically. It's just that Adobe is like one of the biggest examples of it. And I think the problem is that these companies do this and you don't even own the things that you buy anymore. And I think right now we're in like a really weird transitionary period. We're in like effectively middle school for what digital ownership is supposed to be right now. Because nobody can understand, I think, or conceptualize what digital ownership is supposed to be. And you have like some like ideas like NFTs and different types of like blockchain technology. And I think that the truth is that a lot of people, I would say vast majority of people, think digital ownership is the same type of digital ownership that we had in the 90s and the 80s, right? Where it's like you buy the product, you get that product, you can use that product with no restrictions. That's your product. That's it. I think that's what people want ownership to be. And I see no reason why we should compromise with greedy companies about letting that be exactly what it is. And I think that there are examples of things that have online components, but there should be an offline version of it that you can purchase as well. Steam is probably the best example of digital ownership. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I'd have to really think about it. What about updates? Well, I don't know. I think it really depends, right? I think that, some companies can provide updates for free. Other ones don't. It really depends. GOG? Yeah, I hear a lot more good things about GOG. You don't own Steam games? Yeah. Basically, what I think is that I think that if you purchase a video game, they should not be able to revoke your access to that video game. They can revoke your access to using the servers to play online in that video game. Absolutely, that's totally fair. But they should not be able to take the game away from you because you paid money for it. And I think that whenever a person pays money for something, they have certain rights and privileges that they're entitled to. And I think that's one of them. The idea that the terms of service means that you sign all of your customer protections away is outrageous.
Even with this lawsuit, there's actually an entirely different scandal surrounding Adobe at the exact same time.
Ooh.
Believe it or not, they're in hot water for something much worse.
Of course.
In the past several years, big tech has jumped headfirst into the AI boom, and Adobe is no different. They've
like
been
the
integrating
TOS.
AI images into their own stock portfolio.
Yep.
But most importantly, training their own generative AI, Firefly, one very similar to Midjourney or DALL-E, but also integrates into Photoshop and other programs.
Yep.
The only issue is that AIs need data for machine learning. Lots of
Yeah, I think that you have to consent to having your data be used for their machine learning algorithm. But by using a program.
Adobe weaseled in hidden terms into the Creative Cloud with horrible implications. Adobe had very subtly changed their terms that granted them full access to users' local content. And most bafflingly of all, they included that they had a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free, sub-licensable license to use, reproduce, publicly display, and much more. Adobe...
That is crazy. Perpetua, this is nuts. This basically says we own everything. Oh my God.
And much more. Adobe basically decided that taking your money wasn't good enough. They wanted to own your assets, your creations, everything. Adobe could view your local files and do what they wished, but users caught on very quickly.
Our access to your content. We may access, view, or listen to your content through both automated and manual methods. And then down here it says, our automated systems may analyze your content in Creative Cloud customer fonts which are defined over there, using techniques such as machine learning in order to improve our services and software and the user experience.
Not only was this unethical training for their AI, but it also came with all kinds of implications. This is especially concerning for users and companies who use NDAs.
Yeah, if you're using NDA or you're using somebody else's work as well. Like if you have a license for something that you're working on, you couldn't use it on Photoshop as far as I know. And this is, again, I was going to go to law school, but I didn't, so I could be wrong on this. But if you have a license to use an IP, and then you're using that IP, you legally are not allowed to just kind of like sublet out this license to somebody else. Like you can't do that. So like it's insane how overreaching this is. Adobe basically shot themselves in the leg by adding this. Piracy better? Hey, I get it, right? Didn't they change the TOS to only be stuff on their cloud? I don't know.
Protect their work, like those working on films or commercial space. Adobe was
I've worked for civil engineering firms that won't use Adobe anymore because of this? Really? That's interesting. So you pay them to be an employee that they make money from? Yeah, it's called buying early access for a video game. Oh wait, no, that's another conversation. Fuck, sorry. Never mind. Yeah, but with Photoshop too.
To override everything, and the backlash was huge.
Yeah, it should have been.
A worldwide boycott of Adobe began, with many major news outlets weighing in on the story.
The problem is that the Adobe boycott will never stick, and I think all consumer boycotts are effectively worthless. I do. I mean, like, I know that sometimes they're effective, but, like, I don't like relying on them because here's my best way that I can say it, right? And I've said this before, is that in 1965, America got rid of slavery. Companies still use slavery today. The truth is that companies are not accountable to the public in the same way that the government can make them accountable. And whenever consumers get together and they complain, it doesn't really matter enough. Did I say 1965? I meant 1765. Sorry.
Some artists began uploading nightshade art to Creative Cloud, a way of intentionally misleading and poisoning machine learning. Adobe insisted that Firefly was ethically trained, but the evidence was clear. And following the enormous backlash, Adobe quickly changed their terms. They outlined
Of course they did, right? I mean, because again, and this is another problem, is that Adobe right now, the reason why Adobe is able to do this is that they exist inside of a market that they have a de facto monopoly on. As far as I know, there are not a lot of other tools. Like, I don't know, like, what a pie chart for this would look like. But I assume that a pie chart would look like Adobe is pretty much the entire pizza, right? Like, where they have a de facto monopoly on all of the, like, you know, Photoshop-like tools. Like, some people use GIMP. Some people use other things, but like for the most part, yeah, it's basically all Adobe. So they have a de facto, what do you call it? They have a de facto monopoly. And I think that the reason why, a really good comparison for this, I think that is if you look back at what happened with Unity last year with John Riccitiello, which was the CEO, who stepped down after this whole debacle happened. The reason why Unity was held accountable and had to walk everything back as much as they did is because there were other players inside of the market that could take advantage of their weakness. And that's the one good thing about a free market. And I'll give another parallel to this from about 10 years ago, which is when the Xbox One said that you had to always be connected to the internet and you had to have a webcam on your on your console, and you also couldn't own your games and resell them. And then Sony with the PlayStation 4 said, we're not going to do any of this. And because of how consumer unfriendly Xbox was, and like how much better Sony looked because of that, Xbox had to pull all of that back. And I think that now it's the reverse, right? Where I think Microsoft is actually more consumer friendly, but that's like a whole different conversation. The point is that inside of free markets that have genuine competition, you can expect to have consumer boycotts work better. But the problem, there are two issues. Number one is that some people still do get taken advantage of. And if people are being taken advantage of by a company that's being enabled by a law, then that's an unjust law. It shouldn't exist. And the second problem is that that only works when the other companies don't work together and all have the same unfair disadvantages. Like, I'll give you an example with a lot of subscription services now. So have you guys ever gotten like Netflix, Crunchyroll, Hulu, Peacock, any of that? You guys all subscribe to one of these, probably one, or you know somebody who has. So do you remember back whenever the product would originally come out and you would just purchase the product and then that was it and you could just watch movies? Well, now they've added a separate tier that now has ads in it. And it seems to be very interesting to me that all of these companies are doing this now, right? It's not just one company, it's all of them. So George Carlin once said, there doesn't need to be a formal conspiracy when interests converge. So I don't think that they're necessarily conspiring to do this. I think that one of them sees the other one do it, and they effectively test the waters. And then guess what happens? Everybody else does the same thing. And I think that's how microtransactions in video games have happened as well. So I still think it needs to be regulated. But the reason why Adobe is more problematic and it's more evident that it's bad is because of the de facto monopoly that they have on a lot of the graphic design space. And it's a lot different than things like Unity, for example, or the Xbox One, for example, and things like that, right? Fucking Hulu started? Yeah. So it's a bit of a tangent, but like I actually have very strong feelings about this.
New terms, we don't scan or review content that is stored locally on your device. We also don't train generative AI models on your or your customer's content unless you've submitted the content to the Adobe stock marketplace.
Yeah.
A good change, but they've only done so because they were caught doing just that. But they're not out of the clear just yet. You might have caught the last part of that statement about the Adobe stock marketplace. This was once a prestigious resource for artists and professionals, but it is now...
I've taken I think 2 classes in graphic design. I'm not really familiar with how this works, to be honest.
Flooded with AI, with its own consequences. Yeah. Brian Kessinger, a lead artist at Disney...
Shame on Adobe for selling AI imagery on their Adobe stock page, scrapped my art without my permission, using my name on it that I did not create.
AI copies of his work in the marketplace with this name falsely attached to it.
Yep.
While this has increased the breadth of Adobe stock, or catalog of stock photos, it's hard to say that this is a good thing.
DeviantArt also started doing this too, where they have people that are pushing a lot of like AI art on DeviantArt, and it's become like a huge issue. Yeah, I know it's massive. They even sell the AI art.
Quality AI artwork, many of which have incorrect spelling or weird, unnatural details.
If it wasn't bad enough that what's supposed to be a database full of real professional photographs has been completely diluted with unusable garbage, if I did want to license any of these photos, it would cost me $80. $80 for a photo someone generated by typing...
And this is the problem with licensing, I think. And like we're beginning to like come into... I think AI is going to be a very good like manifestation of the problem with licensing. Is that like there's so many, it's like an onion, right? Where you have like all of these different layers of licensing. There's like the licensing of the ownership of it. There's the licensing of the IP. There's the licensing of the use and everything. And it becomes so complex and convoluted that it's effectively impenetrable for an average person.
Adobe is hurting their own reputation as well as their own catalog.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they're still a monopoly. And until somebody brings out a Photoshop equivalent that's as good as Photoshop, or at least close to it, people will have to keep using it because it's the best tool. And also they have a massive first mover advantage because Photoshop has been the de facto thing. Like, I mean, my dad used Photoshop 1.0, right? Like back in like the 80s or the 90s. So like they've been around so long. It's kind of like Twitch, where like Twitch has been around so long. They have such a strong first mover advantage that you don't have people building communities in other markets. Like for example, Mixer or with Kick or something like that.
All of this has placed Adobe in a very bad light, all of which is their own fault. They're greedy, malicious, and their business model is predatory. The people who hate them the most right now are their own customers. All of this exposes a bigger problem that creators
that doesn't sound good.
Are seriously considering.
Just don't
For the past decade,
yeah, you're
the
right.
creative industry has been ruled by
Very
Adobe.
good point.
They got so
exactly. Yeah, they have such a. This is like, I mean, at what point is a monopoly not subject to some degree of regulation? Because you know that, guys. I don't know. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people not in America, right? But like in the U.S. here, we do have monopolies here, but like the monopolies are regulated by the government. Like, I think this is true for a number of like utility services in different places, depending on where you're at.
Successful because they made great products, but over time, they slowly also became a monopoly. In a healthy market with a lot of competition, if a company provides bad services, customers can simply switch to a competitor. Right. So the whole market faces pressure to provide the best service or a unique experience. But for many years now, Adobe has ruled their industry.
I also, by the way, do not think a free market is a solution to this problem. I don't think so. Because in a free market, the best thing for the companies to do would be for everybody to do what Adobe does and then make more money collectively. That's the issue. Yeah, you need to have regulation.
As time has gone on, they've made things worse for the consumer, but things might be changing.
Yeah, it's like, free market solves many problems, but it creates new problems that need to be solved. Yeah, like I am a believer in the free market, but I am a believer in a free market remaining free through regulation. Because I think that in any sort of like, I learned this in MMOs, right? In any sort of a genuine free market, the first thing that you do is make it not free, right? You start price fixing, you start, like scamming and doing stuff like that, like changing deals, etc., right? That's the first thing you do. So you need to have some rules so it's fair to everybody.
People have been advocating others to switch from Adobe, looking for alternatives to this evil monolith. Their products have become notably unstable. Their service has become more predatory. And now, with the changes to their terms...
I'm not sure about the quality of Adobe Photoshop. I really don't know about that. Yeah, but who makes the rules? Well, the government would make the rules, right? That's the same as any rules for anything. The government would do that. Yeah, but he needs good regulation. No, and you're right. And people should be very wary of regulation as well. And it's like, be wary when you're replacing one, what is it? Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Big surprise. You've got a new fucking problem, but it's just a new version of the same problem. It's like I have all these red spiders in my room, and then you replace them with blue spiders, where you've still got fucking spiders all over your room. So yeah, no, you're right. Same shit, different shovel. Yeah, there's a million ones, right? But yeah, I think that you're right. Like, you should definitely be skeptical of regulation too. But I don't think that, I don't think regulation is inherently bad. I think that some applications of it are. And I think that in Adobe's case, some degree of regulation is needed.
Everyone has the best reason to leave Adobe behind. We're finally starting to see progress in the market.
It's too expensive, too.
DaVinci Resolve has become more and more popular as a video editor, especially for blockbuster films, and as has Affinity as a Photoshop alternative. The market seems to be slowly but surely correcting itself, and hopefully this forces Adobe to rethink their ethics, but we'll have to wait and see. If you're interested in deeper dives, interviews with insiders, and exclusive tech analysis, you can sign up to our free weekly newsletter, link is below. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
This is a really good, really good example. I think that, again, like a really good parallel to this is what happened with Unity last year. Because also you have to keep in mind that Adobe, let me read this real quick. What's dumb is that AI art is considered to be public domain. AI tools are becoming better and easier to use. So why are people paying $80 for a shitty licensed photo of an ambulance when they can spend that money on going to their local park and with unsalted peanuts and hard-boiled egg to feed the crows? Okay. Anyway, all right. What was I saying before about, it's about Unity, something about Unity. Right. So another reason why Unity has like a higher standard of business practices is because so there are like multiple types of businesses, but one of them is business to business and the other one is business to consumer. So like Chipotle, McDonald's, something like that is business to consumer, right? You are basically selling a product, and the product is the end product, right? You're buying that direct product. Now, if you're a business to business, you are like, for example, a manufacturing company. Like you sell a product that is then sold to somebody else who turns that product into a different product that then they do it again, or they sell that product themselves, right? And so components, materials, tools, etc., right? So in business to business relationships, the level of trust and accountability has to be a lot higher because in general, there's a lot more zeros behind those transactions. So like, for example, if you go to McDonald's and like, you know, you didn't like the food, you didn't get the food you wanted, you got scammed out of $5, right? But like if you were going and you buy, you know, you set a deal with like, let's say a shipping company and they're supposed to ship over 10,000 boxes and you get 8,000 boxes, that's a big fucking deal because this could have been like a $50 million deal. So yeah, I think that's really the big reason. Well, $5, McDonald's is more now. Look, I mean, I was talking, you buy small fries for $5. So yeah. Yeah, basically it's easier for you to fuck consumers than it is for you to fuck other businesses because there's a higher standard of trust. You can get scammed out of $5 and fucking die if they didn't cook it right. Yeah, sure. But like, that's usually not happening. And so, yeah, that's just how it is. And you see this a lot. But basically, Adobe had a bunch of oopsies for years and they had a really big oopsie. I think that, again, Adobe is simply a symptom of a problem. And that problem is creative ownership of licensing on digital ownership on the internet as a wholesale idea. The entire idea, I think, is flawed. And I think that right now, especially with the amount of licensing that we have, there is no reason for it to exist in the way that it does. So yeah, there's the video right there. Give it a like.